Is the government finally enforcing common sense in women's sports?
Welcome to Answers News for Wednesday, January 22, 2025.
And in today's top story, the House has taken an important step in protecting women and women's sports. My name is Brian Osborne. I'm here with Patricia Engler and Dr. Marissa Tillery. And this is Answers News, looking at these news items from a biblical worldview perspective. And in our first item for today, headline is this: Men have no place in women's sports. House GOP votes to roll back Title IX changes. So as we look at the article, basically, during the Biden-Harris regime, they placed some changes to Title IX to include men as part of the protected class within Title IX, according to the transgender ideology. And so this new bill proposed by the House is a Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act. That's what it's called. And this would change the Title IX protections to ensure that only people assigned female at birth can participate in women and girls athletics. Now, please note the article you see is from ABC News. So you see kind of the left liberal slant here. Only people assigned female at birth can participate in women's sports. Now, we know biblically no one is assigned male or female at birth. They are identified as what God created them to be when they are born, but you're not assigned that. That's given to you by your Creator. But you see the slant from this particular angle. And basically, the article is not excited about the change, but we should be excited because it is common sense change, to be sure. And of course, all the Republicans in the House voted for it. And this bill was bipartisan because 2 Democrats voted for it as well. So very bipartisan, but at least 2. 2 is better than none, right? And basically, the Title IX is meant to be a federal law that prohibits sex discrimination in different educational institutions and programs within our culture today. And basically, it's been twisted. And so this is a correction of the twisting that's been taking place the last few years.
And I think it really points to us looking to the government to solve all of our problems. The opponents of this bill raised concerns saying, oh, this could lead to inspections, even though they're saying people who were assigned female at birth. Well, how do you prove that? With your birth certificate. They're like, oh, no, this is going to, they even retitled the bill, and they called it the GOP Child Predator Empowerment Act. And it's unfortunate that we no longer trust ourselves or others to police ourselves, and instead we're looking at the government to do that job for us. We've lost that Judeo-Christian moral compass that we once had as a nation.
Right, because that's what, recognizes that objective truth exists, and that is actually what gives us the basis for society to function in the first place. I was thinking about a philosopher, Hannah Arendt, who wrote a lot about the dangers of totalitarianism when the state makes itself the authority for truth in God's place, leading to tyranny. And she had some interesting things to say about the importance of factual truth and of objective reality, what she called a common reality for democracy. Because if you don't have an objective reality that everyone can look at and basically be able to agree on based on common sense, then a tyrant can just say, oh, well, I think 2 + 2 is 5, as was the whole premise of Orwell's book, 1984, which I don't recommend. But anyway.
It is depressing.
It's got some issues, but it does make some pretty key points.
Yeah.
So basically, if you have everybody's feelings as the authority for truth, you can't have a functional democracy. So then you end up undermining basic civil rights and freedoms. So I'm glad to see that there has been at least a return towards the idea of common sense, which we saw as well in a recent executive order, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, and before we get to that, the author of the bill said the aim of the bill was to ensure that schools comply with a person's reproductive biology and genetics at birth, which does sound like a lot of common sense. I even retitled the whole title to the article, House GOP Votes to Protect Women in Women's Sports. That just would seem to make sense. That seems to be common sense. And I think a lot of Christians think that, well, this is just common sense. But bear in mind, for something to be common sense, there must be a common authority in our culture. And that's what's shifted. There's no longer that real common authority. There was that kind of Christian backbone to our nation for the longest time, and those ethics bled out into our culture at large. But that has really changed quite a bit, and there's been a cultural change in ethics and morality. So there is no more common authority. Therefore, common sense is given way to a new feelings-based authority, and that's what we see taking place in our culture today. And it's interesting. Marissa, you mentioned the Democrat who actually retitled this bill, the GOP Child Predator Empowerment Act, because she was coming, well, what these people want to do is they want to be able to verify that you're a female or not. That means they're going to be checking you, and that's really meant to attack children and be grooming and so forth. But it's so intriguing because the whole transgender ideology is about grooming children overall. it basically says that children are sexual beings. They can make sexual choices. At a young age, they can decide that they're this sexually and not that sexually, therefore they are sexual persons. It's a form of grooming, and yet this person is projecting what the whole transgender ideology actually does. And Marx is actually said to have said this, that when you're going for the Marxist revolution, you should accuse others of what you're doing while you're doing it. And we see so much of that in our culture today. And so we need to be aware of that and get back to a biblical worldview on these things. And yes, we should be protecting women, no doubt about that. And that's really the whole hope and goal in all of this. And then it's interesting, on the first day of President Trump's new presidential dwelling, he's in the House, he's president now, I'm trying to get those words out. But one of the first executive orders was this: defending women from gender ideology, extremism, and restoring biological truth to the federal government. You got to love the plain reading of that. And we should be thankful that I think we get a bit of grace with this new president and some of these changes in our culture. We see much of DEI taking a hit today, and that being pulled back from in our different institutions and different workplaces and different places like Walmart and other organizations who are pulling back from DEI. But I think we should bear in mind, too, that as we see a little bit of relief from this, I don't think it means it's going away. These revolutionaries pushing this ideology will still fight for it, and we'll be ready for that. And it's in our culture in many other ways as well, so got to be aware of that.
Yeah, for sure. One thing I noticed about this order is it required rescinding a number of federal documents, and it listed about 15 of them, and a lot of them were published under the Department of Education. So most of the federal documents that they were able to point to were from, the Education Department, because it's targeting young people.
That's right.
Because it's revolutionary. They're trying to get activists among young people for their cause. Sexualizing kids is one way to do that, because you're breaking down family ties, you're confusing kids about their identity, and you're kind of restoring kids' identities in activism for what is being touted as an oppressed minority group, transgenderism and so on. So that stood out to me, and it is a reminder as well of the importance of discipling young people. I often say Christians need to be at least as intentional about discipling young people as the secularists are.
Absolutely.
And while this is a great move forward, and we encourage that, laud that, it doesn't really address the underlying issue, which is a heart change in the general public. So that's what we need to be praying for.
Yeah,
That's right.
absolutely. It's
Amen.
the gospel.
And related to this first article will be our second article. Richard Dawkins leaves the Freedom from Religion Foundation board after a pulled article opposing transgender ideology. And so Richard Dawkins, if you don't know, is a very famous atheist. He's a biological evolutionist. And he's been a very staunch atheist for a very long time. He's a smart guy with a cool accent, and so he's very influential. And he's now 83 years old. He was an honorary board member of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and it's described here in the article as an atheist legal organization that advocates for strong separation of church and state. And what's ironic about this from the get-go is the Freedom from Religion Foundation seeks to impose its religion of secular humanism on people and on the culture. It's never been freedom from religion, just really freedom from a particular religion to impose its own religious ideology. It's really what it wants to do. But basically what happened is the Freedom from Religion Foundation, they put up an article entitled, "What is a Woman?" written by a trans kind of activist. And the conclusion of the article was that a woman is whatever she says she is. Which means a woman can be anything. So if you're a man and think you're a woman, then you're a woman and can redefine it any way you want. So it's totally arbitrary, nonsensical. And then, so they published a follow-up article by another atheist named Jerry Coyne, who titled his article this: "Biology is not bigotry." As he goes through, he offers very good arguments in favor of the biological reality of male and female. And he's an atheist, doesn't have the biblical foundation, just kind of the scientific biological foundation. So he gives that article and basically calling out the transgender movement for what it is, not being rooted in reality. And then what happened is once he published his rebuttal article, then many in the LGBT community got offended by that, raised a big stink about it to the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Then the Freedom from Religion Foundation pulled his article and gave in to the request of the LGBTQ mafia. And so because this, Richard Dawkins was very upset about that, so he stepped down from being an honorary board member, as well as Jerry Coyne and also Stephen Pinkery, or
Pinker?
Pinky?
Yep.
Pink?
Pinker.
Pinker, something. There's Pink in his last name. I know the atheist, he stepped down as well, and that's what this article's about.
Yeah, it was interesting that this article by Jerry Coyne, it wasn't just that he put this up there and they were surprised by this and then they took it down. He had asked them and they were like, oh no, you should publish this. They even edited it for him and they put it up there knowing full well what it was. It was only after there was this big stink raised that they pulled that, which is kind of funny because it was published on the Free Thought Now blog, which wasn't very free for sure. But I think it's interesting that the atheists are really waking up to what we've been saying all along. Because if you leave God out and dismiss the supernatural, all you're left with are naturalistic explanations of the world. And so science then becomes this type of God, this end-all be-all to answer all of your questions. And Dawkins recognizes that if you then reject science, as was the case by this group who was rejecting the biological definition of woman, then you're rejecting the very basis for your own worldview, and it's really self-defeating.
Yeah, Pinker had made an interesting quote saying that with this action, the foundation is no longer a defender of freedom from religion, but the imposer of a new religion, which, as you mentioned, this has been the case all along. Atheism asks and answers religious type of questions. You have to have faith to assume some sort of unprovable first principle, just like any other worldview. I also thought it was interesting that the Free Thought Foundation said that we don't feel that the support for LGBTQ rights is against religious backlash in the U.S. is mission creep, because that's something that Coyne had said, is like, you guys aren't just trying to defend the separation of church and state anymore, you're imposing this religion, that's mission creep. But they're like, no, it's not, this is about LGBTQ rights. But it's completely not about rights. First of all, there's never been such a thing as the right to be able to make up your own truth and then force other people to go along with that, regardless of what science actually indicates. But also, Coyne said in his article, transgender people should surely enjoy all the moral and legal rights of everyone else, but moral and legal rights do not extend to areas in which the indelible stamp of sex results in compromising the legal and moral rights of others. That's always been the case with rights. They don't extend towards stamping on other people's rights.
Yeah, your rights end where my rights begin.
Right. One of my ethics professors used to say, your right to swing your fist ends where my face starts.
Yes.
So that's always been the case.
It's interesting, Jerry Coyne, the atheist who wrote the article, had a lot of great quotes in the article. I'll just read one now. He says, because some non-binary people, or men who identify as women, trans women, feel that their identity is not adequately recognized by biology, they choose to impose ideology onto biology and concoct a new definition of woman. And that's really what they're trying to do here. And I think, as you guys were alluding to, what this really reveals is the heart behind this rebellion all along. We look at the move towards materialism, decades past. We got all these people saying that evolution disproves the Bible, science disproves the Bible. We got to follow the science. Well, those are bad arguments. We'll see some of that later on, right? But really, their whole heartbeat, their goal was not to follow the science, but to have an excuse to rebel against God. And now you get those in the transgender movement. The science doesn't line up with what they're feeling or what they think. So what do they say? Forget the science. We got to follow my feelings. I feel this way, therefore I define my reality. What is this? It's the new step in autonomy. I will be my own God. You'll not define me, God. I'll define myself. Thank you very much. And we want to be our own God, which is as old as Genesis chapter 3. This is not new. It's just another expression of autonomy and rebellion against our Creator. That's what it is at its core. And that's why, as a ministry, we want to give answers about origins and evolution and sexuality and gender and give a defense, but the point is not to stop at the answers, but to get to the gospel of Jesus Christ, because it's a hard issue ultimately, and the gospel changes the heart. So we do apologetics, defend the faith, to remove excuses to proclaim the gospel effectively. And that's a heartbeat in all this. And we got a couple books up, kind of focus on that just a little bit. Top one there, a book called Quick Answers to Social Issues. This book deals with a bunch of social issues from a biblical perspective, 37 questions answered from a biblical worldview, very short, very concise, very ADD friendly on that one. We deal with transgenderism in that one, sexuality, so forth and so on. The author may be a bit sketchy. I don't know about him, but
Brian Osborne.
it is a good, concise resource to give you a bunch of answers. And then another book that does a great job covering so many topics related to this is this book, called Modern Marxism. And this book is written by Patricia Engler, this young lady right here to my left, and then she did an incredible job really breaking down what modern Marxism, what that looks like, what it is, and really kind of showing how the tentacles of ideology and sexuality and Freudian thought are kind of woven into the modern revolution. You can speak more on that if you would like, but it's in there. It's really well done.
Yep, that pretty much sums it up, just really showing how all these, so many of the issues we see today do tie back to this ultimately false gospel rooted in Marxism, so helping Christians answer that, but also respond to it. It can be really easy to get discouraged by all these things we see in our culture today, but the whole last third of the book talks about, okay, how then shall we live, and ends on the hopeful notes.
Yeah, really well done. So good resources, be sure you check those out. And moving away from transgenderism, thank the Lord, let's talk about evolution for a little bit. This article entitled, Evolution Witnessed in Real Time as Lizard Species Collide. And I like to retitle these articles sometimes. You could retitle this article, Lizards Make Lizards.
Ooh. That's kind of into
Nice
it.
effect. We didn't even practice that. We didn't plan that. Nice job. All right. And so I want to read you just the first couple sentences to give you a feel for how this article opens up. It says this. We often see the result of evolution, but not the process directly. Now, scientists have been treated to front row seats of evolution unfolding in real time as two similar lizard species encounter each other for the first time and quickly adapt to fill different roles. So what I want you to note right up front is that the way this is poised to the reader, you're going to see evolution. Evolution is absolute fact. And by the way, when they say evolution, yes, they're talking about adaptation here, but they're really implying the whole theory. Mm-hmm. Molecules to man, organic evolution, really geological evolution, long periods of time, cosmic evolution, the Big Bang, it's all true. And this will be the evidence that proves the whole theory must be true. So they start that way. And they go through and talk about how they really were studying a Cuban brown Anoles lizard from Florida. Then another lizard came up from the Puerto Rican crested Anole lizard came up, and they collided, as the article says. And they began to study how they respond to each other. And it goes on to say this. Although the two lizard species looked very similar, they're actually separated by more than 40 million years of evolution, living on different Caribbean islands. However, they do fill almost the same ecological niche in their environments, living in the same kinds of habitats, eating the same kinds of food. So even right off the bat, they say these lizards are separated by 40 million years of evolution, but they look pretty much the same and do the exact same thing. They haven't changed in 40 million years. And it goes on to talk about how they changed when they collided and how they evolved from lizards into lizards.
Yeah, this is really just a story of adaptation within these lizards, not them changing into any other sort of animal. And I just recently moved up, it's not even recently, I've moved up from Florida last year, and these lizards are everywhere. You can barely walk without stepping on them. They're so common. And this was looking specifically at a botanical garden in Miami. And I think it's interesting to note that these aren't just native to this region. They're very common in the Caribbean, and they hitched rides into Florida and spread throughout the southeast United States. And so they say that this is something new that we haven't seen before, but then other articles have observed in other places where these species have lived for many generations that these sort of changes happen. But again, they're not changes that lead to molecules to man evolution. They're just adaptations within these animals. And even in different Caribbean islands, there's multiple species that exist simultaneously, and yet they're still lizards. I can't repeat that enough. And really these miraculous changes that they see that one lizard moved to be more common up a tree and one stayed on the ground a little more. So I guess they don't really like each other and they want to be in just slightly different places. And then the ones that stayed on the ground, they started growing slightly longer hind limbs with this. So again, they're not these drastic changes. They're not changing into different animals.
So the legs didn't evolve into wings?
Oh, no.
Okay, all right.
No,
Which would have helped them, because the reason that they evolved longer legs was to help them run faster and boost their survival rates to get away from predators. But if they just evolved wings, that would have made life more simple.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of storytelling in these articles. There's a lot of what we call the bait and switch fallacy as well. So talking about the only kind of evolution we observe is variation within kinds of living things God made. There's certain limits that the genome actually sets. So you can't just get wings from legs because, you'd need brand new information in the DNA,
right.
which if you just have random mutations, you're not going to be able to get. So we see variation within created kinds. We do not see change between created kinds, and that is what they're trying to say, essentially. And then they give all these other examples of what's supposed to be evidence for evolution, but every single one of them is for sure just variation within kinds of living things. Geckos growing slightly larger heads, fish becoming less mobile, swallows getting shorter wings, frogs going black. So all variation within kinds, and also the article kind of implies that they're doing this intentionally, like what you said about getting longer legs in order to escape predators or that type of thing. Evolution doesn't have a mind. There's no foresight involved. You don't have frogs, unlike what they're implying here, who are like, well, radiation could be a problem. We should really make sure that our ancestors, or our descendants rather, are a darker color to be able to accommodate that better. That's not how it works. So
It'd be interesting if it was.
it would be, yes, but there's some really strange things coming through in this article. But just an encouragement, if you can tell the difference between variation within kinds and change between kinds, and recognize that we don't actually see the latter happening, you can get through entire evolutionary biology classes at secular university, no problem, because they don't actually give you evidence for evolution.
And here's the deal. Natural selection and mutations, those are real things that cause real variation in living kinds, roughly the family level modern day classification. But natural selection and mutations, they shuffle, duplicate, or lose existing genetic information. They do not add it. That's why lizards stay lizards, and cats cats, and dogs dogs. And guys, we can't overemphasize how much this argument is used to try to persuade people that evolution must be true. And if evolution is true, the Bible's history is false, then why trust about anything else? From Darwin's finches, where finches evolved into finches, to pepper moths evolved into pepper moths, lizards into lizards, just variation, adaptation, speciation, exactly what we expect from the biblical worldview. And a great confirmation of God's word and rejection of evolutionary ideology. Speaking of really rebuking evolutionary ideology, this next article, Digital Resurrection, Advanced Simulations Reveal Secrets of Human Evolution. And again, I retitled this one, Advanced Simulations, Programmed to Show Evolution, Show Evolution. That's really what happens here with this. So basically, they were looking at Lucy, Australopithecines afarensis, supposedly an ancestor of modern humans today, one of these hominids, these ape-man transitions. And they were trying to figure out, how did Lucy evolve? And what did she need to evolve to become more human so humans could thrive and take over the population from the ape-men, the apes before them? And they looked at her locomotion, her ability to run. And they studied that, okay? How did she run? How did her running improve to make her survive better and to do better in her environment? And so there are so many layers of assumptions here. So they took Lucy, they took her bones and put it in a simulation, of course, added with a human flair to it based on evolutionary ideology. And of course, if you look at Lucy's bones, the original bones, they're all very much like a chimp. Very similar to a modern day chimp. That's what they look like. But they're kind of rearranged or reformatted to fit more the evolutionary paradigm. And then they gave her Lucy's feet. Now, they found no foot bones belonging to Lucy, the original fossil. They did find other Australopithecines. They found hand bones and foot bones with them. And all the hand bones for the Australopithecines are long, curved fingers that have locking knuckles, knuckle walkers. They have feet with big toes out to the side like apes today. And yet they gave Lucy human-like feet in all the replicas we see in books and museums and so forth. Why did they do that? Well, they found some footprints in Laetoli that looked very much like human footprints, but they were dated to be 3.5 million years old by secular estimates. So they assumed those footprints belonged to Lucy. So essentially in the simulation, they took a chimp-like body, stood it upright, gave it human feet, and tried to make it run. And that's why she ran so slowly. So she ran very poorly. And like, wow, Lucy didn't run that well. How could she improve her running so she could last longer, survive better, and evolve into more of a human thing? That's what the whole article's about.
Yeah, and they ended up not being too concerned that she wasn't running very well because they were like, well, at least she can walk. And that was the first step in human evolution, even though she was still living in trees supposedly at the time, but she could walk but not run. So I don't know. Yeah. Anyways, I was looking at evolutionary sources because this article, or who was reviewing a scientific paper that was published. The muscles, they pointed out, they said, okay, look, the bones don't really tell us a whole lot. We need to look at the muscles, the tendons, and the ligaments, but of course that isn't what's preserved when you have a fossil, right? Only the bones, the hard things are what is preserved. You don't really know what the muscles looked like. So what can we do? Well, we'll give her chimp muscles, or we'll give her human muscles, and then we'll see like how she moves and see if it's better when she gets more human muscles or whatever. And so I thought, oh, they're changing a lot here. This sounds like, they're really doing a very thorough examination of this, but they really only changed the gastrocnemius and the soleus muscles, which are your two muscles in your calf, basically. And the rest, I guess, were human-like. I couldn't really tell from their simulations that they put up online. But that's not what is really important to this, because you just change two things, you make it more human-like, and you say, okay, she can sort of try to run or whatever, but there's so much more that goes into running and walking than just these two muscles. So if you think about it, like your whole body is involved in when you run. And I was looking at other evolutionary bent literature, and they were saying, there's many anatomical characteristics that are unique actually to modern humans that help us run. So for example, we need to sweat when we run so we can release that extra heat. We need a balanced head. It's no good if your neck isn't attached to your head in the right way and then you're bobbing around when you run, right? We need decoupled shoulders to allow our head to point forward while our arms are going back and forth. We need shorter forearms than apes, so we're not knuckle dragging, when we're running. Shock absorbers in the back to catch that movement. We need longer legs to run, stiffened arches in our feet, and an enlarged heel bone for shock absorption. So there's so many things that just point to the incredible design that God has placed in humans specifically to allow us to fill the earth, image him, do what we were supposed to do that's not given to the apes or these ape-like creatures supposedly. And evolutionists just breeze right over that because they want to tell this story.
Yeah, all really good findings. And it's just important to remember as well, when you come across these headlines, it can be easy to maybe get a little nervous thinking, well, these are smart scientists, they have these high-tech simulations. But remember, these are all based on assumptions. Like you were saying, Dr. Tillery, they just had to come up with what they think the muscles and tendons might have looked like based on their prior storytelling, based on all the other layers of storytelling that you were talking about. So what we can observe is that if you put these factors into the simulations, this is what you end up getting. But all of those factors are, again, just based on prior evolutionary assumptions and storytelling, which is not actually scientific. So again, hopefully that's an encouragement. And it's always good to, as you're reading through these articles, ask, what are the things that we can actually see in the present here, and what are the assumptions and speculations about the past? And you'll find the facts that we do see fit a biblical view just fine. If you want to learn more about Lucy, you can definitely check out our website, answersingenesis.org, and you can find more information really affirming that she is likely just an ancient sort of ape.
And also we have a book here called Glass House, Shattering the Myth of Evolution. There's a lot of these popular evolutionary arguments talking about natural selection, adaptation. Is that evolution in action? What about the ape men? Does a great job of giving you a great straightforward answer, not too sciencey, if you will, but really good details, enough to give you a great answer on those sorts of things and equip your family to defend the faith. Great resource.
And when you come to the Creation Museum, you'll see Lucy as she was in ape-like form.
That's right. It's a great display. Really cool. And speaking of wrong assumptions, wrong conclusions, leads to the next article. Democrats stockpile abortion pills ahead of Trump's inauguration. And so what's happened is basically, even though Trump has been fairly quiet about abortion in his run up to becoming president, there's still fears that he's going to outlaw it all. And so there are certain Democrats in different states who are stockpiling the abortion pill. To be sure, just in case if he were to somehow to outlaw abortion at a federal level, they'd have these abortion pills still ready to give out, because we need to be sure we can kill babies at all cost. And that's what abortion really is. It is killing a human being made in God's image. Life begins at fertilization. We know that logically, scientifically, and biblically. And to take that life at any point past fertilization is murder if you do it intentionally. And so that's what's taking place, but they're stockpiling these pills. One example given in the article is the New Jersey governor who says, we're going to stockpile these pills just in case something happens where they take away the right to abortion in our nation. And it's interesting. He said he's going to fight for the values of New Jersey, which I found, kind of something that should pique our interest or really get our attention because it is true that we see values shifting in our culture, and a lot of our leaders are reflecting that. They don't tend to be very courageous to have their own values, but they'll look at the culture, put their finger up, put it in the wind. How's it blowing? I'll go with that, and they'll fight for those values. And that should give us an awareness of a shifting foundation of culture and to stand on biblical authority to engage those issues.
And I don't think it's necessarily even what worldview or ideology is most common in our culture. It's just whoever is the loudest,
Very
really.
true.
And so I think this article really points to the need to pray for our leaders, pray for those who are in charge of this country, leading us into the future, that they would, well, for one, most important, turn their lives over to the one true God and follow his ways, and that they would lead us in wisdom for that. I liked at the end of the article, it says that the number of brick and mortar clinics in the United States, abortion clinics in the United States, has been consistently shrinking due to a combination of dedicated pro-life activists, pro-life laws, and it must be noted, Planned Parenthood's growing monopoly. I would say praise God for that. That is wonderful news. We don't want to see these things out on the street, but unfortunately that has led to this shift into more accessibility for these abortion pills that you can get and use in the comfort of your own home. So really just be aware of that shift in the movement as you go out and advocate for pro-life.
Yeah, and it's also worth pointing out that this isn't about women's rights and women's health, because they don't even, since 2016, the FDA hasn't even been had requirements to collect data on adverse health effects for women except for death.
Regard to the abortion pill.
Yeah, maternal death for taking this pill. So the information we have, which is typically pretty high complications and stuff, comes more from Finland. For instance, the article mentions that there's up to 20% of women who experience complication with the pills, 4 times higher than other types of abortion. And again, that's Finnish data because they don't collect data in the States. But I also wanted to point out that this is very, very common. A lot of women have taken these pills, and it's not too late to be a pro-life person if you have already done that. We have a great book you can find on our website, Moving Forward After an Abortion, and as well as if you go to creationmuseum.org/baby, there's links for if you're dealing with an unplanned pregnancy where you can get help, and also if you've had an abortion, a ministry linked there, Healing Hearts International Ministries, really good gospel-centered ministry for moving forward from that, so hopefully that is an encouragement as well.
Good summary. All right, and just very quickly, the last article, not much time for this, but I thought I'd just still show it anyway. It says this: intelligent life in cosmos is likely very rare, says paleontologist. Some might argue intelligent life on this planet is extremely rare. But that's a different issue for a different time, all right? But basically, it's interesting. So, of course, in evolutionary thinking, life evolved here by random chance over long periods of time, and this is just a happy accident. So surely it happened by accident in other places around the universe. There's got to be life out there somewhere. And that's why you see the clamor for evolutionists to find extraterrestrial life, because it'd be a confirmation in their thinking of their particular worldview. And but here's the deal: we found none of it. So how do you look at its evolution? Well, you look at our evolution by their thinking and think maybe it evolved in a similar way in different places around the universe. In short, since we're running out of time, basically they say, well, intelligent life evolved here. We evolved here. We're very special, but likely didn't evolve anywhere else. And you got to wonder, from an atheist perspective, evolutionary perspective, why are we so special? In the biblical worldview, we know why we're made in God's image. They have no foundation for that, but it's all throughout the article.
Yeah, I liked this quote. It says, but paleontology, the study of ancient life, is a good place to start when asking profound philosophical questions. In other words, you can go to science to answer questions about philosophy. They want science to be worldview neutral, but as we saw with the article of Richard Dawkins and the Freedom from Religion Foundation, science is never neutral.
For sure. And also just the idea that, we have life here, so therefore we must have life in other planets as well. No, I heard a creationist pretty well summarize it up. Like, it is impossible to get life from non-life, so you can't do the impossible even once, let alone multiple times over. So, and also just remember how amazingly God designed the planet to be able to support life. So there's a lot of pretty massive leaps in logic for them to even make these speculations in the first place.
And with all these articles, the scientists that we're looking at, we're not trying to attack their intellect. They're brilliant people, especially in their particular fields. It's their worldview that's led them astray in their conclusions. That's really the ultimate issue. But there's a lot more we could talk about. We got to wrap up now. A couple things coming up. First, we got our Wonder Junction Answers VBS. Marvel at Jesus, Live for His Glory. And our VBS is incredible. I know I'm biased, I work here, but they do a phenomenal job. The great content of our ministry paired with just the entertaining stuff that happens with VBS, they do a wonderful job putting that all together. We have an event for that coming up this weekend, Friday and Saturday. We kind of see an exhibition of this VBS. It's going to be a great time. That's over at the Answer Center. But check it out, Wonder Junction. And then also we have our women's conference coming up very soon. This year's theme is Resolute. And it is an awesome conference. It's really well done. It's probably our most popular one. It's the
That's
most
why we have to have
well-attended.
two.
That's why we're doing it twice. And so great speakers and refuting false gospels with biblical truth. It's going to be a great theme for this year. So much more on our website about that and other conferences coming up. We're glad you joined us here today. That's all the time that we have. God bless, and we'll see you guys next time.